Windows is a ubiquitous operating system, but how do we make sure it's secure? Stay tuned to find out more.
You're watching IT Pro TV.
Hey there, we're talking about Windows security, and well, the first place we need to stop whenever you're talking about Windows or Linux or whatever, I need to know a little bit about that whole ecosystem, right? Like Windows itself, many different versions and types, and so is that a good place to kind of put our setting before we consider anything else?
I like where your head's at, Justin. Let's do that very thing. Let's take a look at the different types of Windows operating systems or the different OSs that you might run into that are under the umbrella name that is Windows, right? So typically we're talking about either our desktop operating systems, if I can say that correctly, and the server operating systems. Two different things meant for two different things, which is why the differentiation. And if we're not understanding what the heck is going on there, then we might not be securing them properly. So let's just take a minute and take a look at that. So with the desktop operating system, this is meant to be for an end user. Could be either a home, small business, or even in a full enterprise environment, but it is meant to run the applications that an end user might run. These are things like office suites, right? This is email clients, web browsing. These are the typical types of activities that will occur on a desktop operating system. Now, juxtapose that with server operating systems. What are servers meant to do? They're meant to give actual resource access, right? So servers could be things like a web server. So Microsoft Windows operating system has IIS that I can install and configure and run my own website up to enterprise level, right? Does a great job. Also does things like DNS, the domain name service. So it can do all that translation. Active Directory, probably their biggest seller, honestly, and it does a great job. That's why, is being able to control and manipulate and organize the different objects within inside my organization, all from one centralized area. So there's your difference between a desktop or a server operating system. You'll see the desktops will be, well, Windows 7 is end of life already, so hopefully, right? Justin's got the right idea right here. Hopefully. You're not running Windows 7 at this point in time.
You probably are.
Yeah, you probably are. It's going to be running around for forever, right? Just like XP, right? XP's not anywhere. Yeah, it is. It's all over the place. Anyway, so you got Windows 7, Windows 8, 8.1. We also have Windows 10, which is the current version that's out right now. These are going to be those desktop operating systems. And then you have Windows Server. I still see Windows 2008 servers running around, Windows 2012 servers. Hopefully we're seeing more 2016 and 2019 servers, which have the ability to do all these different services for us, roles and whatnot for our organizations. And like I said, they do a fantastic job of those services, so which is why we see a lot of that being handled and lifted by the Windows operating system. So hopefully now we are familiar with both the desktop and server.
Now, you said it was we have end users, we have these server things. Anytime I hear end users, I'm like, all right, we got to be able to lock this down, like apply permissions. Windows has a story for that, right?
Yes, Windows definitely has a story for that. And what we mean by that is you don't just walk up to a Windows machine and start doing stuff. And maybe you do. Hopefully that's not how it works. Hopefully you have to do something like log in. Where does that come from? And why is that making it secure? Well, if I just allowed anybody and their brother to walk up to the computer, or sister, as it were, right? They just walk up to the computer and start clicking on stuff and doing activities. How do I control access to certain objects? They make it very difficult because the computer doesn't differentiate between Justin and Daniel. So what does Daniel have access to versus what does Justin have access to? I'm just giving access at this point. So we work with user accounts to help deal with that. So inside of the Windows operating system, you have a couple of different ways in which you could deal with accounts. You have what's called local accounts, and then you have domain accounts. Depending on your environment, you're going to work with one or both, or the other, okay? Typically in a Windows environment, you'll probably, if in a domain environment, you'll probably see the utilization of both of them. But let's start off with a local account and kind of figure out what's going on there. Let's log into this 2012, my beater 2012 server that I keep around for doing fun stuff with. Let's see here. Let me get logged in. And of course, it knows who I am because I have a user account. But we're going to look at the local user account for this machine. To get into that, I can go Start, and I can go to Control Panel. This is one of my favorite ways to do it. You can either go to User Accounts, and here you'll see I have access to this account, and I can manage user accounts and go here. That's one way of doing it. I am super old school, so I still do it through account management. So I'm going to go back. It's just how I am, right? I go to Administrative Tools, and then we have Computer Management. Once I click on that, you can see over here that there should be, well, it's Computer Management, but oh, you know why? Because I have this is a domain controller. So that local account management has been stolen from me. But let's see here. Can I get to that from here? I want to say there was a way to do it, even though account manager, I guess you have to use the account manager when you have an Active Directory. So you would come here and you would start to manage the user accounts. I don't work in Windows as much as I used to, so I forget these things from time to time. But there you go. You notice I've got a couple of users here. I got Bob, I've got Guest, but this differentiates between each person that has access to the system and what their access is, down to the user level, okay? Where they should go and where they should not go. If I need a new user account, I can add one, put in the name, I want Justin. Let me scroll in a little bit. If he's part of a domain, I can do that. I can browse for his asset and hit next. It's probably wanting domain. I'll put work group. I don't know if it's in a work group or not. I forget I guess it's cool code. There we go. Whether it's a standard user, an administrator. So what level of access should Justin be having? Now, Justin, what access do you think I should give you?
Should you give me standard?
Yeah, standard.
What do I want?
Why?
I want that admin.
You want that admin.
I want that admin.
That's right.
Yeah. Principle of least privilege.
Right. But principle of least privilege comes in fall. I probably, even if Justin was an administrator of the system, I probably would create 2 accounts. One for administrative duties and another for just Justin's regular everyday tasks. So I'd have a Justin and like a Justin _ admin kind of thing going on. So here I would come in, give Justin standard, go back, create the Justin admin, and give him administrative. And I'll just click next here. Now that I've got him going, there you go. He's finished. Yay. Yeah, well, it's because work group probably doesn't exist, but that's fine. I was just kind of showing you guys how this works. So I'll cancel out of that. So there's user accounts. Those would be the local user accounts. But as I've mentioned, this is a domain controller, which means it has an Active Directory domain and it controls said domain. We have the ability to work with that as well. Go away, user accounts. Thank you. So let's bring that up. Let's go to, I think it's server, there it is, server manager. And in there, I can go to the top right, go to manage, no, not, it's tools, there we go. Active Directory, users and computers. Once I click on that, it should bring up this lovely box here. I will full screen it. And you'll notice that in here, look what we have. There's Bob. This is a user account. See, it says type the name and then the description of the account. There you go. So I can come in here and create new user accounts. So if I wanted to, I could just right click, go to new, go to user, and from here I could definitely create Justin and say DNISON. Full name's Justin Dennison. User logon, we'll make it just Justin at Coolco. Click next and cancel. Oh, no. Oh, it's asking for a password. Again, more authentication, right? I'll give Justin a password. And of course, I'm met with all these lovely little requirements here or suggestions for security. User must change this logon at the next password at the next logon. Probably a good idea because I shouldn't know his password. So I'm going to go ahead and force him. I'm going to say, here's your initial password. Log on with that. It should ask you to reset it. I can make it to where he can't change his password. I wonder if they cancel each other out. Let's see what happens. Cannot check. Both user and change password to next logon, right? Because they They contradict each other. I can make his password never expire, though. Goes back to our password policies. Would that be a good idea? Probably not. And whether or not the account is disabled. Then I can click next and finish. Now Justin has a user account, bing. He'd be able to log into the system. He's good to go. He would have access to the resources that Justin has access to. So now we've seen local accounts and Active Directory accounts. Now remember, with a local account, you're only affecting things that are on this local computer. With an Active Directory account, that goes throughout the entire directory structure. So any resource that is available to the users in that directory, Justin would then have some form of access to, and we could set that accordingly depending on what his status was in the company. So hopefully users are something that's a little less mysterious maybe.
You've cleared up a few things for me. I think just being around Windows systems a little more, I go, oh yeah, that kind of does make sense. That doesn't mean that I'm going to go start using Windows anytime soon, but that's perfectly okay. It's important to know these, right? You need to differentiate the Windows types. Also know when things are end of life so you can make an appropriate plan to move forward. Windows 7 and XP, yeah those are bad. But also know about how we can set policies just locally or across a larger group. Now, Daniel, before we get out of here, any last thoughts?
Well, yeah, we got to cover groups. We only covered the users. We didn't get into group accounts.
Wait a minute. I got confused.
Yeah, see, and it brings up a good point, though. You might think of them ubiquitously because of how we interact users with groups inside of a Windows system.
Yeah, so this is something that I still struggle with every time I have a discussion about Windows is like groups and roles and stuff. Like you have like this weird mushy terminology from my standpoint, so to speak.
Well, when I was learning Windows systems, they used the ADGLP. All right, you had the account, which went into a group, which gave the permissions, and blah blah blah. This is basically role-based access, is what we're trying to do. So what I should do, the proper secure way to make sure that people have only the rights they need, following that practice of least privilege, right, or principle of least privilege, is by taking my user accounts and instead of applying permissions to those user accounts, which is a managerial nightmare, we're going to create a group that covers a role. So if Justin is a developer, I should create a group called developers. And all the things that the developers would need access to, the permissions to, I should set those permissions on that group. And when I make Justin a member of the group, guess what happens? The permissions of the group get inherited to Justin, right? They pass them down. He is a child object to that group. So if I put Justin in the administrators group, he will have full administrative access. Now remember, there's the local administrator and there's a domain administrator. There is a forest admin as well, if I'm not mistaken, or enterprise admins, right? So depending on what group you drop him in, he's going to have those specific permissions. If he just, by default, you just get put in the everyone group or the domain users group, which is basically the everyone group for an Active Directory domain. But then we start getting into adding permissions. So to add a group, let's jump back in super quick. Same kind of idea, right click, hit new, hit group. And from here, I can create a group. So if we wanted devs, I could create devs. We do have this group scope, which is domain local, global, or universal. Can be important for you to know that, which is, if it's domain local, it means only this Active Directory does it work on, okay, just this domain. But if you have a forest of domains, which you have multiple domains that are connected together, I would want global. And then universal, or I'm trying to remember, it's been a while since I've gone through these permissions. I actually forgot this was going to be here. But that's basically what you're looking at. Domain local might actually be just this machine. And then, of course, global is going to be everybody in the domain for every part of that domain. And then I think universal is throughout all the forest. Justin's going to fact check me. I already see him cranking away. But then you have the two different types, security and distribution. Distribution groups are typically just email groups, if I'm remembering correctly, when it comes to this stuff. Security groups is what we're more concerned with, because what are we going to do with that group? Are we going to send emails to it, or are we going to use it to set permissions? So now I can tell security group is what I want because I'm going to set permissions for these devs so they have access to these different things. And maybe you'll notice it is by default set to global. Justin's looking at the terminal. He's got a jaundiced eye right now.
Yeah. Man, this is wicked confusing. So domain local accounts from any domain. Member permissions can be assigned only within the same domain as the parent domain local group.
Okay. I know. Terminology's fun, isn't it?
Global is member permissions can be assigned in any domain.
Right.
And then
So
universal
I was right
is
the first time.
any domain or forest.
Or any domain or forest.
That's your
okay,
universal.
So there's your universals.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So there we go. We cleared up that little mess. I was basically right the first time I went through it, which was the local domain local is going to be just this domain. Global is going to be all the domains that we have a trust with. And then with universal, it's any forest we have a trust with and the domains within those forests. Wow. Lots of fun there. Definitely check that out if you have never seen this before. It could be helpful for you if you are setting up permissions inside of an Active Directory. So I'll hit OK. It's created the group. I can now go into that group, find that members tab, and then go down here. I'm sure there is a add button, which there is. Scroll out a little bit to zoomed in. I can look for Justin, which is not spelled JS. Hit that check names. It finds him. Okay, Justin is now in there, and I can start applying these permissions. That if Justin ever changes job roles, which I'm sure never happens, right? No, at all. I just drop him in a different group. He loses the permissions to the dev, and he gains the permissions to whatever it is groups. If he jumps over to HR for whatever reason, he's like, forget this dev business. I really want to help people get jobs and, kill all the fun in a company. I'm going to go to HR. I can see it in his face.
It's just sadness.
It's just sadness. Yeah, there it is.
It's never going to happen.
Never gonna happen. But there you go. We've set that, and then just hit apply or OK, and you're good to go. So this is the idea. From here, I can go to maybe like an object. I'll kill this. So maybe this new text document. Right click, go to where is it? Properties. All at the bottom. Now I can jump into that security tab and start editing this. I can come in here, add the group, devs, check names, hit OK. And now devs are here and I can start setting permissions. And of course, we've had the permissions episode. You know what to do from here forward. Hit apply, hit OK. The permissions are set. Now Justin has those permissions. He's good to go. All right. So that's the basic idea. Also, don't forget about good old group policy. It always comes into play when it comes to an Active Directory domain. That's where you're going to set a lot of the very fine-tuned security permissions when it comes to your different groups. WSUS gets a lot of action when it comes to group policy as well. So go in there. You can lock down browsers, backgrounds, desktops, you name it. You can get crazy with that to make sure your environment is secure as it possibly can be, and use those tools to your advantage to that end.
I just want to make sure. So I'm creating groups. I apply permissions. I put people in the groups. That's going to be my first wave of like managing permissions if I have a setup like this, right? And then I have edge case exceptions based on the individual because I don't want to have to go through every user in an organization and apply permissions and manage those independently, right?
I mean, if you got 5 people in your organization, then maybe it's not so bad. But you start getting hired in 10 or 20, your job just got hard.
I always have to be careful. I'm like, 5 people I can manage. And then all of a sudden you get like this, something goes viral or you get like a contract and you go, we got to hire a bunch of people.
Yeah.
And then you employ these poor practices that are not scalable. So just something to keep in mind as far as like what your current business value is. Well, thank you so much, Daniel. And thank you for joining us. But for us, we're going to go ahead and get out of here. So signing out for IT Pro TV, I've been your host, Justin Edison.
I'm Daniel Lowry.
And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for watching IT Pro TV.